Samuel didn't think twice. The old woman had collapsed in the middle of the road, and while others looked away, he carried her on his back and rushed her to the hospital. What he didn't know, what no one could have guessed, was that saving her would be the very thing that saved him. But how did saving her life turn out to be her saving his? Stay back, enjoy, and the truth will surprise you. In a quiet village wrapped in red dust and rustling trees, a boy named Samuel was born into the world already fatherless. His father had died just months before his birth, leaving behind nothing but a rusted bicycle and a young widow named Mama Cynthia. Life was hard, but it was warm. Samuel grew up knowing only his mother's love, a love that wrapped around him like a threadbare blanket on cold harmattan nights. She gave him everything she had: her food, her time, her hands, her strength. Mama Cynthia was a slender woman with soft eyes, and though the world was hard on her, she never once turned her hardness on her son. She worked tirelessly, pounding cassava, selling groundnuts, taking in laundry from neighbors, anything to put food in their mouths. Samuel was her only child, and she loved him like the last candle in a storm. By the time he turned 12, Samuel had become a thoughtful boy, quiet, observant, and unusually mature. He loved school, not because it was easy for him, but because it gave him hope. He wanted to be someone, to lift his mother from the dust that had caked her feet since youth. But life, as it often does, took another turn. Mama Cynthia fell ill. It started as a fever. Then came the coughing, the weakness, the refusal of her legs to carry her. At first, they thought it was malaria, then typhoid. But the truth was more brutal than any diagnosis. It was poverty. Poverty that had crept into her bones and made a home in her lungs. She could no longer move from the mat that lay on the mud floor of their little home. And with no relatives, no siblings, no cousins willing to help, all they had was each other. At 12 years old, Samuel dropped out of school without a word of protest. Each morning, he would tie his tray of plantain chips or sachets of pure water and walk the long village roads, hawking with a bright voice and worn slippers. Some days were good, others were not. But every kobo he made, he brought home to buy medicine for Mama, or beans for dinner, or charcoal to warm her weak body at night. He never complained, even when his classmates mocked him, even when adults whispered that he was cursed and the cause of his father's death. Samuel held his chin high and walked with purpose. He knew they had no one else. And more importantly, he knew what Mama had done for him all his life. How she had gone hungry so he could eat. How she stitched his clothes late in the night. How she shielded him from the sting of life like a lioness guarding her only cub. Years passed like that. At 17, Samuel's back had already bent under the weight of manhood. By 20, his hands were calloused from carrying more than any child should have to. But through it all, he remained gentle. He would come home at night and sit beside his mother, now nothing but skin and bone, brushing her hair, feeding her spoon by spoon. Then came that night. A cool breeze blew through the open window. The lantern flickered, casting shadows on the wall. Mama Cynthia, with tears in her eyes, called Samuel to sit beside her. He knelt beside her mat and took her frail hand. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry, Samuel. You were just a child, and I became your burden." His heart broke right there on that mat. "Don't ever say that," he replied, his voice steady. "You are not a burden. You gave me life. You gave me love. You gave me everything. I watched you start to feed me. People said I was cursed. They told you to abandon me, but you didn't. You loved me when no one else did. Taking care of you has been my greatest joy." She sobbed then, the way only a mother does when she sees the man her child has become. "You are a good man, Samuel," she whispered. "Don't ever lose that heart. If one day I'm no longer here, know that I love you, and I will always protect you, wherever I am." "No, Mama," he said, lying beside her. "You'll always be here." That night, they slept hand in hand, and in the morning, Samuel awoke alone. She was gone. Her chest no longer moved. Her face was still, almost peaceful. He called her name once, then again, until the truth sat heavy in the room. The only person who had ever loved him that much was now still. Tears came, and they did not stop. Later that week, He used what little money he had to bury her himself. No one came. Just Samuel, with a spade and a simple wooden cross. He buried her under the shade of a tree and whispered goodbye. Then he walked home, but the house did not feel like home anymore. He lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, realizing that there was nothing left for him in that village. By dawn, he packed the few belongings he had, a spare shirt, a photo of his mother, a few coins, and left for the city, hoping to start again, alone, but with his mother's voice still echoing in his soul. Samuel had no plan when he left the village. No destination, no promise of comfort, only a quiet resolve to live the life his mother had dreamed of for him. The city, as vast and noisy as it was, seemed like the perfect place to bury his grief and start fresh. There was no room for nostalgia here. Not when his heart was still cradling the echo of his mother's love. Not when his hands still bore the marks of years spent feeding her, caring for her, loving her. The long bus ride to the city was a blur of motion. A sea of faces, some tired, some eager, some indifferent. Samuel sat at the window, his eyes fixed on the passing landscape, though he could barely see through the dust that clung to the glass. The only thing that felt real was the weight of the photo of Mama Cynthia, folded carefully in his pocket. It was the only thing left of her, the only reminder that he had once been someone's entire world. When he arrived, the city didn't greet him with open arms. It was harsh, crowded streets, endless honking of taxis, the overpowering smell of diesel and sweat. Samuel had never seen so many people in his life. The sounds felt like a storm, each one more chaotic than the last, but he didn't flinch. He had learned long ago to endure, to listen more than he spoke, to wait for a chance and grab it when it came. With nowhere to sleep, he found the quietest corners he could, usually in front of closed stores, curled up on the cold pavement, making do with what little he had. He didn't need much, just the space to breathe, the air to dream. But his stomach growled often, reminding him that dreams alone couldn't keep him alive. So he worked. At first, it was the simplest jobs. He washed cars during traffic jams, his hands greasy from the soap, his back aching from the constant bending. Some people gave him money, others didn't. He didn't mind. Every coin that passed through his fingers felt like a small victory, like a promise that he would be okay, even if the city seemed determined to swallow him whole. Then, one day he met Kelvin. Kelvin was young, like Samuel, but his confidence was something that Samuel had never known. He wore a faded t-shirt and jeans, but his shoes were always clean, his hands never tired. Like Samuel, he spent his days on the streets, but there was a certain ease about him, a knowing that Samuel couldn't place. They bumped into each other when both were cleaning the same car, the owner having parked in the same spot. At first, there was an awkwardness between them, two strangers, both struggling to make ends meet. But then Kelvin smiled. It was a bright smile, one that could light up even the darkest parts of the city, and Samuel found himself smiling back. From that moment on, they were inseparable. They worked together, shared stories, and most importantly, looked out for each other. Kelvin would bring Samuel breakfast on the days when he didn't have money for food. Samuel, in turn, would offer to help him wash cars when Kelvin's hands were too tired from a day's work. The bond they shared felt like a brotherhood. For the first time since leaving the village, Samuel felt like he wasn't alone. They laughed together, cried together, and struggled together, but somehow the struggle didn't feel so heavy with Kelvin by his side. Months passed, and life began to settle into a rhythm. They found a small kiosk to rent, a tiny, ramshackle place that smelled of old wood and freshly painted walls. It wasn't much, but it was theirs. A space to sleep, a roof to protect them from the rain, and a small table where they could sit and dream about a better future. It wasn't long before Samuel got a job as a taxi driver. It wasn't the most glamorous of jobs, but it was steady, and it paid the bills. With each passing day, he felt more like a man, more like the person he had always wanted to be for his mother. The hustle of the streets, the noise, the chaos, it all became part of him, and he began to understand the city's rhythm. Kelvin, however, remained restless. He was always looking for something more, always hoping for something bigger. He would complain about the pay, about the long hours, about how life in the city was too hard, too unfair. Samuel listened to him, but he never joined in the complaints. He didn't have time for that. Every moment was a chance to move forward, to honor his mother's memory by making something of himself. One day, Kelvin came to Samuel with news. He had found a job that paid well, really well, and he was going to take it. Samuel was happy for him. They had both worked so hard, and he knew that Kelvin deserved this opportunity. But what Samuel didn't expect was how quickly everything changed. Kelvin began dressing differently. His clothes became more expensive, his attitude sharper. Samuel didn't mind at first. He was glad for his friend, glad that he was moving up in the world. But soon, things started to feel different. Kelvin didn't come home some nights. He stopped sharing his meals with Samuel. He no longer smiled like he used to, no longer spoke with the same warmth that had drawn Samuel to him in the first place. And then, one day, Samuel came home to find that Kelvin had packed his things and left. No word, no explanation, just gone. Samuel stood in the doorway, staring at the empty space, unsure of what had happened, unsure of where his friend had gone. But life went on. Samuel didn't let it break him. He focused on his taxi work, focused on surviving. He had learned long ago that nothing was guaranteed, that all you could do was push forward, no matter the weight of the world on your shoulders. Then came the day he saw Kelvin again. It was a few months later. Samuel was driving his taxi down a busy street when he saw a familiar face. It was Kelvin, stepping out of a brand new car, dressed in sharp clothes, his face unreadable. For a moment, Samuel felt a flicker of joy. His friend had made it. But as he waved and called out, Kelvin didn't even look his way. It hurt more than Samuel cared to admit. He drove off, his hands gripping the wheel a little tighter than usual. As he did, the city felt colder, emptier. But he knew that he would survive. He had to. But in the back of his mind, something told him that Kelvin's path would cross his again soon. The city had a way of doing that, bringing people together, only to tear them apart, then bringing them back once more. Months passed. Samuel kept his head down, driving his old, rattling taxi through the streets of the city. Life was quiet, predictable. He woke early, cleaned the car, waited in line at the park, picked up passengers, and returned late. The same loop, over and over. He didn't make much, but he stayed out of trouble. He avoided gossip, noise, and anything that smelled like shortcuts. In the evenings, he would sit outside his small compound, watching people go by with a bottle of malt or a plate of rice if he could afford it. Some nights he prayed. Some nights he just stared into the darkness. He thought of his mother often. Sometimes when he passed a pharmacy or saw a woman walking slowly with a child, something would grip his chest. He would remember her thin hands, the way she used to hum in the evenings, even when pain twisted her face. It was her voice that kept him from straying. That quiet, stubborn grace. One Thursday morning, just as he was lacing his shoes and preparing to leave for the park, someone knocked. He opened the door cautiously. There stood Kelvin. Gone was the clean-shaven, loud-talking boy from before. His clothes were sharp now, designer sneakers, crisp trousers, gold chain peeking out beneath his shirt collar. His skin glowed, and his beard was trimmed to perfection. But beneath all that polish, his eyes looked restless, like someone who had walked through a long, confusing dream and hadn't yet woken up. "Samuel," he said, voice low, "I know I shouldn't be here. I know I hurt you. I left you when I shouldn't have. I was stupid." Samuel said nothing, just leaned on the doorframe, watching him. Kelvin sighed and rubbed his face. "You were the only one who ever looked out for me. You shared your food when you had nothing. You gave me shelter. And his voice broke. "I betrayed that. I don't even know how to ask you to forgive me." The silence stretched between them. "I don't know," Samuel finally said. "You changed. You just vanished. Then I saw you, and you looked through me like I was dust." "I know," Kelvin said, nodding. "I was ashamed. I was angry at myself. I took it out on you. But I want to make it right. There's a job opening where I work now. I told my boss about you. He said he'd like to meet you." "What kind of job?" Samuel asked, squinting. "Just logistics. Running things. Deliveries. Driving. I know you're smart and honest. It pays well, Samuel. You've suffered enough. You deserve more than this." Samuel hesitated. Everything about this felt odd. but his heart still wanted to believe his friend had changed. Kelvin's voice softened. "Please, let me help you this time. Let me do one good thing." Eventually, Samuel nodded. "All right, let's see." They agreed to go that Saturday morning. When the day came, Kelvin arrived in a dark blue SUV. Clean, polished, foreign. It had leather seats and a scent that reminded Samuel of money. Samuel sat stiffly, feeling out of place. They drove in silence at first, winding through busy city roads. Samuel asked where the company was, but Kelvin just smiled and said, "Relax, you'll see." They stopped at a small roadside kiosk to buy bottled water. Kelvin went inside to make the purchase, leaving the car idling. As Samuel waited, something caught his eye. A small crowd had gathered on the other side of the street. Curious, he stepped out of the car and walked over. There, lying motionless on the ground, was an elderly woman. Her wrapper was dusty, her slippers missing. Her breathing was faint, chest barely rising. People stood around murmuring, some with hands on their heads, but no one moved to help. "She just collapsed," someone said. "Maybe she's already gone." "She's dirty," another added, pulling their nose. "And smelly. It's probably drugs or disease." "A beg, no touch him." Samuel knelt beside her and touched her forehead. Burning. He looked around, then opened a water bottle and tilted it to her lips. "Grandma," he said softly, "please drink small." Some of the water dribbled down, but then her mouth moved. She took in a little more. Samuel pressed his palm to her chest and rubbed gently, trying to wake her system. Minutes passed. Then suddenly, the woman gasped. Her eyes fluttered open. "She's alive," someone shouted. Samuel stood quickly, lifted her into his arms, and looked around. "Where's the nearest hospital?" Then he saw Kelvin, standing a few steps away with 2 water bottles in his hands. His face wasn't concerned. It was furious. "Leave her," Kelvin said, voice low and sharp. "Get in the car. We're already late." "She needs help," Samuel said. "There's no time. Let someone else handle it." Samuel's eyes narrowed. "I can't leave her like this." "If you go with her," Kelvin snapped, stepping closer, "don't ever call me again." Samuel stared at him. His old friend, the brother he had once shared bread with. And just like that, everything became clear. "I'm sorry," Samuel said softly, "but this is who I am." He turned, hailed a bike, and with the woman cradled against him, rode off. He spent the next 7 days at the hospital, staying by her bedside. He bought her food, helped her sit up, changed her wrapper, told her stories. She rarely spoke, just smiled gently and touched his hand with thin fingers. She reminded him of someone he couldn't place. Then, on the 7th morning, he woke to find her bed empty. Confused, Samuel rushed to the front desk. "She checked out early this morning," the nurse said gently, recognizing his face. "But she left this note for you. She said you should open it only when you get home." Samuel blinked. She walked out. She did, on her own 2 feet, stronger than any of us expected. He took the envelope with both hands, holding it as though it might disappear. The nurse gave a small smile and patted his arm. "Some people come into our lives like a whisper," she said, "but they leave behind thunder." Samuel nodded slowly, still half in a daze. He left the hospital quietly, the envelope tucked safely into his breast pocket. On the bus ride home, he didn't speak. He just stared out the window, watching the city slide by in bits and pieces. Market stalls, okadas weaving through traffic, hawkers slapping windshields with sachet water. His thoughts were heavy, tangled. The old woman had hardly said a word, yet he had felt something around her, something calming, familiar. Her presence reminded him of his mother in the final months. That same quiet strength, that same look in the eyes, like she had seen more than she let on. And now she was gone. By the time he got off the bus, the sun was already tilting west. The air was thick and noisy, but Samuel's mind was far away. He was a few streets from his compound when he noticed the crowd. Voices floated through the air, shouting, confused, half laughing, half scared. People had gathered at an intersection near a barber shop. Some were recording with their phones, others just watching like it was street drama. Curious, Samuel edged closer. Then his heart slammed hard against his ribs. In the middle of the road stood Kelvin. His designer shirt was torn at the collar. His gold chain was missing. His eyes were wild, darting from face to face like a cornered animal. He gripped his head with both hands, trembling violently. His feet were bare. "Is that not that big boy from last week?" someone whispered near Samuel. "The one that drives SUV?" I hear he started shouting inside the fuel station. They said he removed his shoes and started confessing madness. Samuel stepped forward, stunned. "Kelvin," he called, voice low but clear. At the sound, Kelvin stopped. Slowly, he turned. Their eyes met. "Samuel," Kelvin breathed, lips quivering. His face crumpled. "All you had to do was enter the car. Just that. But you went to save that stupid woman." People turned to look between them, but Samuel barely noticed. Kelvin's voice broke. "I joined the ritualist group, Samuel. I thought it would be easy. They told me there'd be power, money, everything I wanted. But it was time for me to make a sacrifice. I didn't want to do this to you. But if I didn't, I'd be the one to pay." His eyes were wide with panic, his voice trembling. "They said I had to bring someone pure, someone like you. Someone who's never stolen, never hurt anyone. I thought you'd just get in the car with me. You were supposed to come with me. I never meant for it to be like this. But if I didn't bring you, it would be my life they'd take instead." He started to sob, then laugh, then sob again. His fingers clutched his scalp as if trying to pull something out from under his skin. "I was supposed to bring you for the sacrifice. I had 7 days. 7. He held up his fingers. "They said the 7th day, or I would pay instead. I waited. I thought you'd come. I thought you'd say yes. Why didn't you say yes?" Gasps ran through the crowd. A woman pulled her child back. Someone murmured, "Sacrifice? Jesus." Another person whispered, "Ritual people." It don't happen again. Kelvin dropped to his knees in the middle of the street, screaming at the sky. "They said I had to give him someone pure. Someone who never stole, who never hurt anybody. I thought you wouldn't know." Then he bolted. Before anyone could stop him, Kelvin took off down the road barefoot, weaving through cars, shouting nonsense. People scrambled out of his way. Samuel didn't follow. He couldn't move. He just stood there. His brother in the struggle, the one he had shared rainwater and dry Gary with, planned to kill him. He felt his knees wobble slightly, and he grabbed the wall beside him for support. A man beside him said, "Brothers, you Sabi am?" Samuel didn't answer. His throat was tight. He walked away slowly, hand over his heart, like he was holding something broken in place. When he finally got home, the compound was quiet. A neighbor's child was sweeping sand into a small pile by the corner, singing softly to herself. A chicken clucked somewhere. The sun had dipped low, casting long shadows across the cement floor. Inside his room, Samuel locked the door behind him. Samuel sat on the edge of his bed, the last light of evening casting a warm orange glow across the room. In his hands was the envelope the old woman had left behind, the one who had appeared in his life like a whisper, like a storm, like an answer. His fingers shook as he opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. The handwriting stopped his breath. "My son, I will always protect you wherever I am. Continue to have a good heart." He stared at the words. They were hers. The same words his mother whispered the night before she died. Weak, but full of conviction. Words that had carried him through pain, hunger, betrayal. Words he never forgot. And now here they were, written again by the hand of a woman who had no reason to know them. But she had known, because it was her, his mother, the old woman no one would help, the one he had lifted off the ground and rushed to the hospital, the one who had stood by him when he was at his lowest. She hadn't appeared by accident. She had come because he needed her. She had come because she never truly left. Not a ghost, not a vision, but a mother. Even death could not keep her from her son. Tears spilled freely down Samuel's face, his chest rising and falling with quiet sobs. He pressed the letter to his heart like it was the last piece of her he would ever touch. She had protected him in life. And now, somehow, even beyond life, she had come to protect him again. Not because he deserved it, not because he earned it, but because he was her child. He stepped out into the evening air. The sky above brushed with the first stars of night. The world had grown quiet, like it too was listening. Samuel looked up. "Thank you, Mama," he whispered, voice thick with tears. It wasn't a miracle. It was love, fierce, eternal, and unbreakable. A mother's promise, kept beyond the grave. He stood in the stillness, no longer afraid of tomorrow. He didn't have riches. He didn't have comfort, but he had what mattered most: a good heart, and a mother who never stopped loving him, not even in death. Do good, not because you expect a reward, not because the world is watching, but because it is right. A good heart carries power the eyes cannot see. Even when no one thanks you, even when the road is hard, the goodness you plant never dies. It protects you, it guides you, and in your darkest hour, it may be the very thing that saves you. Dear viewers, what lessons did you take away from this dramatic tale? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed the story, give us a thumbs up, share it with friends, and hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss out on our latest updates.